Just continuing on with the book of Ezra in the Old Testament. And last video I was looking at Ezra chapter 2 and some of the lists of people who returned to the land, and there were careful records made about those names of people, the people who were going to be noted down as being genuine, bona fide people who would be part of the whole structure, the administration structure and the functioning structure of the rebuilding of the temple, the functioning of the temple, all the things which were necessary to get going so that worship of God could be re-established. And so sometimes there's the situation where we require organization, we require things to be put into place, to be functioning, so that everything can get rolling, everything can be up and running. There's nothing worse than a disorderly situation where nobody knows what they should be doing and nothing is in order. People are confused about their role. People are confused about who's in charge and what responsibility they carry. And it's quite easy to do that when you're starting something. And what's wonderful about the book of Ezra is that it's full of things being well organized. And for those of us like myself who that doesn't come naturally, it's something that we've learned or had to learn through the years, but we have a tendency to be perhaps a bit more spontaneous, a bit more slapdash, perhaps not terribly good at structuring things. We might find that we see that as a little bit unnecessary or a little bit draconian and a little bit over the top. But the incredible thing about Ezra and Nehemiah as well is that the organization and the structuring of things comes into the text very strongly. And this helps us understand that everybody had a part to play. Everybody had a particular section of the wall in Nehemiah. Everybody had a particular role, a function, and they had to be noted as somebody who was appropriate for the job as well. So the genealogical records, the records of who's who, become a very big part of that in Ezra chapter 2. Ezra chapter 2 is all about who's who. And it's interesting just at the end of it too. I'm just going to mention something because I know it's quite hard to go through all the names and all the numbers of people and all that sort of stuff, and it gets a little bit hard to get through the text because of all those names and numbers that seem to go on and on. But there's just a little bit that does help, a tiny bit of narrative that's thrown in there, and it says this: 3 families of priests, Hobaiah, Hazos, and Barzillai, also returned. This Barzillai had married a woman who was a descendant of Barzillai of Gilead, and he had taken her family name. They searched for their names in the genealogical records, but they were not found, so they were disqualified from serving as priests. The governor told them not to eat the priest's share of food from the sacrifices until a priest could consult the Lord about the matter by using the Urim and Thummim, the sacred lots. So it's interesting that there was this particular guy, he had adopted somebody else's name. So he was connected in a certain way, but he wasn't actually really fully qualified to be in this group of people. Was it about racial purity? What was the issue? What was going on here? It was about understanding clearly who God's people were that had come back to the land. And it matters. If I'm trying to do a family tree, if I'm trying to research who my relatives are, who my ancestors are, where they've come from, where are my roots? I want to go back in the UK to things like parish records. Maybe to a certain extent you can go back to the census. And some of my family have done that in an incredible way, and lots and lots of detail. And you can easily get it quite wrong, actually. You can easily make a mistake. The same surname doesn't mean, obviously, it's the same family. And so this was the case with this guy. And it mattered to them to understand who was part of God's people at that point. And there's something quite important here, is that the Bible talks about God calling a people to himself, calling out a people to follow him. In the New Testament, it talks about an ecclesia, the word is in Greek, the called out people. It's something about this community of God's people. And it's somebody was saying yesterday, very, very interestingly, how God takes the minority, not necessarily the majority. What that means is it's not just open access to everybody just for whatever reason, just wondering how you like, do what you like. It's not some kind of religious anarchy that God's setting up. His kingdom isn't full of anarchy, it isn't full of this feeling that there are no rules, you don't have any guidelines, there's no qualifications to it, there's nothing like that. No, there's a very big difference with this, and this is important. In order to come into that community, you have to abide by what that kingdom means. That a king is about authority, a kingdom is about a reign of authority, and obedience and following, being a disciple, being committed to that community, being part of it, following the footsteps of Jesus. You don't become part of a community unless you identify with it. Otherwise, you're sort of wanting all the benefits, but you're not engaging with it. Quite often people have great dreams of community life. They say, I'd love to join a community. I've got this great idea. We'll have a big community house and we'll have all the benefits of being around lots of people, and it'd be so nice, and it'd be cheaper, and it'd be a kind of quite organic lifestyle. And yet, what's the reality is that any community requires commitment. It requires order and discipline, and requires mutual relationships working out, and it requires boundaries. And that's true of God's kingdom too. In order to be part of his kingdom, there's an order to it. And so with privilege comes responsibility, as people say. And that was a really key part of these people who were going to be part of building the temple. They weren't going to just be a rabble. It had to be an organized plan and project. I don't think anybody's achieved anything without being organized to some level or some degree. And the more people involved, the more the level of organization really required, so that communication works, so that relationships don't break down, so that people get on and do what they need to do, and they don't start trying to interfere with somebody else. And that's part of functioning. We live in a very real world where we can quickly cause each other frustration and stress. And so my prayer today is that we would find our place in what God wants, but also we would understand how to come into the jurisdiction, the ways of his kingdom. In walking in obedience with him, we'd find where we fit in his family. We would flourish because we know what our role is. We would feel comfortable with not trying to be somebody else, not trying to compete with everybody else, not trying to somehow squeeze ourselves into some kind of role that doesn't work. And we all have those challenges, don't we? We just need to be really realistic and honest, sometimes with ourselves and with others, about what is my role? How should I function? And what does God require of me? What is his purpose for my life? All those questions, they have to come into the reality of, okay, if I'm going to be part of what he's doing, if I'm going to be part of his kingdom being built, if I'm going to be part of God's rule in this earth and his plan for mankind, if I'm going to engage with that, if I'm going to work with that, then I need to submit myself personally to his plan. I need to allow him to place me where he wants me to be. There's a yielding of ourselves, because he has the best plan for us. And, we will find a sense of fulfillment. We will flourish in the right niche. We will flourish in God's good, perfect plan for our lives. I pray that we would understand that. Pray we would discover that. And especially in the context of wider community, we would find that if we want to find God's purpose for us as a part of the wider Christian community, then we sometimes need to know how we fit and what does God want in our lives. And I think that's true in every aspect. It's true if you're going to be part of a family. It's true if you're going to be part of a neighborhood. It's true if you're going to be part of a nation. It doesn't matter. There are the ways that we need to fit so that we do flourish and we do find our niche in the best possible way. And that's a good thing. You know, there's so many people who are frustrated, aren't there? There's so many people who spend so much energy looking for some faraway purpose and they can't seem to find it. And that can lead to hopelessness. If you don't really know what your function is in life, if you can't really see how your life could flourish, then in the end that leads to a sense of hopelessness. If it feels like there's no point to it, then you will become depressed and you struggle. You know, in certain stages of life, people experience that very strongly, and maybe certain periods of life where things haven't worked out. So I pray that if that's your experience right now, that you would find how to flourish, and you would know that experience of encountering Jesus. And as we're encountering him, that's what brings us into his family. That's what makes us part of his people. That's what makes us part of his community of faith. That's what brings us alive. That's what causes us to start to blossom. I pray that for you. I pray that for all of us, that we would experience and we will find the part where we belong, where we can flourish, where we can blossom, and we can be very fruitful in our lives and fulfill the good and perfect plan that God has for us.